She stood frozen in the diner, the torn fabric falling from her shoulders, her tattoo burning in the silence as every pair of eyes turned toward her. In that moment, shame and destiny collided. "Hi, my amazing family. I've really missed you all, and I can't thank you enough for sticking with me. Your love and support mean the world." If you're excited for today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be back with another story just as captivating, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get started. The morning sun spilled across the chipped linoleum floors of Gracie's diner, the kind of place where truckers came for coffee at 5 a.m. and old men nursed biscuits for hours. Naomi balanced 2 plates of scrambled eggs and toast with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, though her wrist ached from the double shifts she had picked up this week. Her apron smelled faintly of grease and coffee, and she didn't bother with makeup anymore. What was the point? The customers weren't looking for glamour, they just wanted their coffee refilled before it cooled. Yet, despite her exhaustion, Naomi had a presence that filled the diner. Her voice was warm but firm, her laugh quick and contagious when she allowed it out. Beneath her practiced smile, though, sat a guarded heaviness. She tugged at the sleeve of her uniform unconsciously, pulling it down to cover the edge of the tattoo inked into her shoulder. Almost no one knew the full story behind it, and she preferred to keep it that way. To her it wasn't art, it was a scar carved into skin, a reminder of everything she had endured and couldn't erase. "Naomi, order up," called out Gracie, the stout owner with kind eyes but a businesswoman's sharpness. "Got it," Naomi answered, her voice steady. She slid another plate onto a table of tired factory workers. "Thanks, darlin'," one of them said. Naomi smiled, but her eyes drifted to the clock. 6 more hours, she told herself. Then she could go home to the tiny apartment she barely afforded. She would sit by the window, sip cheap tea, and let the silence settle over her. It wasn't much of a life, but it was hers. On the other side of town, Adrian Blackwell leaned against the balcony of his penthouse, looking out over the city skyline. He should have felt powerful, he always had, but lately the glass walls and imported furniture felt like a cage. His phone buzzed with messages from lawyers, investors, and women who wanted to be photographed on his arm. He ignored them all. Adrian was the kind of man people either admired or despised, the self-made millionaire who could buy and sell anything, yet never seemed satisfied. His suits were tailored, his watches gleamed, but his eyes carried a sharp restlessness. Inside, the polished dining table was littered with unopened mail. His late father's foundation wanted donations, his ex-wife wanted more alimony, and his doctor had sent yet another warning about his drinking. He poured whiskey into his coffee mug anyway, smirking at his own defiance. "Why does everything taste so bitter?" he thought. Despite his wealth, Adrian was lonely. He told himself he didn't need anyone. Companionship was just another transaction. But in the quiet hours of dawn, he found himself wondering when exactly life had slipped through his fingers. That morning, a reckless impulse struck him. He would drive out of the city, find some hole-in-the-wall diner, and eat like a normal person. Maybe anonymity would give him a taste of something real. The bell above Gracie's diner door jingled just past noon. Naomi glanced up, towel in hand, and nearly groaned. The man who stepped inside didn't fit the place. Tall, broad-shouldered, expensive watch glinting under his cuff, he looked like someone who'd gotten lost on his way to a country club. His sharp gray eyes swept the room like he owned it, and the chatter softened as people sized him up. He slid into a booth in the corner, not waiting for permission. Naomi picked up her notepad and approached, her practiced waitress smile in place. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice neutral. Adrian studied her a moment longer than polite, something flickering in his gaze. "Coffee. Black. And whatever you recommend." "Eggs and toast, then." She scribbled it down. "You always decide for your customers?" His tone carried a teasing edge. "Only when they look like they've never been in a place like this before." For the first time in weeks, Adrian almost laughed. Almost. Naomi walked away, shoulders tight. Something about the way he looked at her made her skin prickle, not in the flattering way men sometimes looked, but as if he was trying to see through her. She hated that feeling. At the counter, Gracie leaned in and whispered, "You okay, honey?" Naomi forced a smile. "Yeah. Just another customer." But deep down, she knew he wasn't. As the diner hummed with the clink of forks and low conversations, Naomi and Adrian existed in separate orbits, two lives bound by invisible threads neither could yet see. The waitress who carried scars beneath her skin. The millionaire drowning in wealth and emptiness. And somewhere between a chipped coffee mug and a plate of eggs, their worlds were about to collide in a way that would shake the entire diner to silence. Have you ever met someone completely out of place? Someone who felt like they didn't belong, but changed everything the moment they walked in? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The diner had settled into its afternoon lull, the kind of quiet that fell after the lunch rush but before the evening crowd. Naomi wiped down the counter, humming softly to herself, her body moving on autopilot. Adrian sat in his corner booth, long fingers drumming idly against his coffee mug. He'd been watching her longer than he meant to. There was something about the way she carried herself, chin up, smile easy but not careless, that pulled at him. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing. And yet, she radiated a strength that made his chest ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. When Naomi returned with his refill, he leaned forward. "You always this calm? Or is it just for the uniform?" She arched an eyebrow. "You want me to spill coffee on you to prove I'm not?" He smirked. "Might be worth it." Naomi rolled her eyes and walked away, but heat crept up her neck. She hated men like him, smooth, entitled, assuming the world bent to their charm. Yet, for reasons she couldn't name, his words lingered. Minutes passed. Then something shifted. Adrian called out sharply, "Hey," just as Naomi passed by his booth again. His hand shot out, catching the edge of her apron. The sudden tug startled her, and before she could step back, the fabric tore with a sickening rip. The diner froze. Naomi gasped, spinning away, clutching at her uniform. But it was too late. The fabric had ripped across her shoulder, bearing the ink she'd hidden for years. The tattoo. Bold, unmistakable, curling across her skin. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Forks clattered onto plates. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward her. Adrian's smirk faltered. He hadn't expected this. He thought it would be a teasing gesture, something to pull her closer, to break through her practiced walls. Instead, the sight of the tattoo seemed to swallow the entire room. Naomi's chest heaved as her hands tried to cover the mark, but the whispers had already begun. "Is that? No way. It can't be." The air thickened with curiosity, judgment, shock. Adrian's gaze locked onto the tattoo, recognition dawning. He'd seen it before, years ago, in news articles, maybe, or whispered stories. The mark wasn't just art. It carried weight. History. A tragedy that once made headlines. Naomi's knees nearly buckled under the weight of silence pressing in on her. Heat burned her cheeks, but her eyes hardened as she looked at Adrian. "What have you done?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again, words evaporating on his tongue. He hadn't meant, he hadn't thought. But the damage was done. Naomi dropped the notepad from her hands, the pages scattering across the floor. She stood straighter, her breath shallow, her body trembling but refusing to collapse. "Everyone happy now?" she whispered, her voice cutting through the stillness. The diner didn't answer. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, caught between morbid curiosity and shame for staring. Gracie moved from behind the counter, her voice sharp. "Naomi." But Naomi held up a hand. Her eyes never left Adrian. "You think this is a game?" she hissed, low enough only he could hear. "You think you can just rip away the pieces of me I've fought to protect?" Adrian swallowed hard. He felt an unfamiliar twist in his gut, shame. He'd acted on impulse, the same way he always did, but this wasn't a boardroom or a nightclub. He had humiliated her. Exposed her. And yet, beneath the fury in her eyes, he saw pain. Deep, raw, unhealed. The kind of pain he recognized in himself. Naomi turned abruptly, storming toward the back. The kitchen door slammed behind her, and the room exhaled in a rush of murmurs. Adrian sat frozen, his hand still resting on the torn fabric of her apron. For the first time in a long time, he felt the sting of consequences. The diner, once humming with ordinary life, now buzzed with electric tension. And though Naomi had vanished into the back, Adrian knew one thing with bone-deep certainty: nothing would ever be the same after this. The kitchen smelled of onions and fryer grease, but Naomi barely noticed. She pressed her back against the cold metal door, her chest heaving. Her trembling hands clutched at the torn fabric of her uniform, trying to cover the exposed ink as if she could somehow erase what had already been seen. The tattoo burned like fire on her skin, not because of the ink, but because of the eyes. Dozens of them. Staring. Judging. Whispering. "Naomi, baby," Gracie said softly, following her inside. She reached out, but Naomi flinched back. "Don't," Naomi snapped, her voice shaking. "Don't look at me like that." Gracie's face softened. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of." Naomi let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't hear them. The way they went silent. Like I'm some kind of freak show." Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. She had sworn never to cry in front of anyone again. Not after the night she got the tattoo. Not after the whispers, the gossip, the way people had treated her like she was broken. Out front, the diner was buzzing with uneasy conversation. Customers leaned across tables, piecing together rumors, wondering if what they thought they knew was true. And Adrian sat in the middle of it all, his coffee cold, his appetite gone. The weight of what he'd done pressed heavy on his chest. He could still feel the fabric tearing under his hand, could still see the look in Naomi's eyes. He told himself it wasn't his fault. He hadn't meant to humiliate her. He didn't know what that tattoo meant, not really. He had acted on impulse, like always. "But you grabbed her," a voice inside him accused. "You tore her clothes in front of everyone. You did this." Adrian clenched his jaw and pushed the thought away. He wasn't the kind of man who apologized. People usually apologized to him. That was the order of things. Still, he couldn't shake the image of her retreating, shoulders rigid, hands trembling. When Naomi finally emerged from the kitchen, she had changed into a spare uniform. Her face was calm, her movement steady, but her eyes were sharp, daring anyone to say a word. The diner fell quiet again as she walked through, picking up plates, refilling coffee, pretending nothing had happened. Adrian watched her, guilt gnawing at him. He wanted to speak, but when she came to his table, her voice was cold enough to cut glass. "Finished." Adrian cleared his throat. "Naomi, I don't." She snapped the check down in front of him. "Just pay your bill and go." Her eyes flicked to his hand, the same hand that had torn her apron, and then away. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing how much he'd shaken her. Adrian stared at the check, his pride warring with something deeper. He wanted to defend himself, to insist he hadn't meant harm. But the words caught in his throat. For the first time in years, he felt small. Naomi turned sharply and moved to another table, her smile forced, her voice steady as if nothing had happened. But Adrian noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly when she poured coffee. The room itself seemed divided. Some customers avoided looking at her, embarrassed by their own stares. Others watched with morbid curiosity, whispering behind napkins. And in the middle of it all, Naomi and Adrian stood locked in invisible resistance, she refusing to be broken, he refusing to admit fault. Later that night, Naomi sat alone in her apartment, the quiet pressing in. She tugged her sleeve down over the tattoo, even though no one was there to see. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror stared back with weary eyes. She hated how one reckless moment had stripped her defenses away. She hated Adrian for it. She hated herself for letting it matter. "Never again," she whispered. "I won't let him or anyone get to me." But her voice wavered. Because deep inside, something in his eyes had unsettled her. Not just arrogance. Not just cruelty. Something else, something almost broken. Across the city, Adrian poured himself another drink in his empty penthouse. The glass trembled in his hand, though he told himself it was anger, not guilt. He should forget her. Just another waitress in just another diner. But the way she had looked at him, like he was nothing but a spoiled boy who broke things for fun, cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He replayed the moment over and over. The rip. The silence. The tattoo. He didn't know the whole story, but he wanted to. For the first time in years, someone had looked at him not with envy or greed, but with contempt. And strangely, it made him want to prove he was something more. Adrian downed the whiskey and set the glass aside. He wasn't sure if he wanted to apologize, explain himself, or simply see her again. But he knew one thing, he wasn't done with Naomi. The diner's bell jingled again 2 days later, and Naomi's stomach clenched when she saw who stepped inside. Adrian. She had prayed she'd never see him again. She had prayed he'd stay tucked away in his glittering world of penthouses and polished boardrooms. But here he was, wearing a crisp navy blazer that made him look even more out of place in the humble diner. Conversations faltered, customers sneaking glances. Naomi's chest tightened. She turned quickly toward the counter, determined to ignore him. But Gracie caught her arm. "Honey," she whispered. "I need you to wait his table." Naomi froze. "No." "Yes." Gracie's tone was firm. "He asked for you. Specifically." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "I don't care what he asked for." "Naomi." Gracie's voice softened. "You can handle him." And she hesitated, lowering her voice further. "Business has doubled since that night. People are coming in, curious. We can't afford to turn him away." Naomi's jaw clenched. This wasn't fair. But life had rarely been fair. She grabbed her notepad, squared her shoulders, and marched toward his booth. Adrian rose slightly as she approached, surprising her with a gesture. "Naomi." She slapped the notepad on the table. "What do you want?" His lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "Coffee." And a chance to explain. She stiffened. "Coffee I can do. Explaining? Not interested." Her pen scratched quickly across the page, and she spun on her heel before he could reply. When she returned with the coffee, he didn't reach for it. He studied her instead, his gaze softer than before. "You're angry. You have every right to be." Naomi laughed, sharp and humorless. "Glad you figured that out." "I didn't mean to humiliate you." "Intent doesn't erase impact," she snapped, slamming the mug onto the table. The coffee sloshed dangerously near the rim. Adrian didn't flinch. "You're right. But if you'll let me, I'd like to make it right." Naomi folded her arms across her chest, tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve. "You think you can just fix this? With what, money? A smile? People like you think everything's for sale." Something flickered in his eyes at her words. For once, he didn't look amused or smug. He looked wounded. "Not everything," he said quietly. Naomi blinked, thrown by the vulnerability in his tone. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Before she could respond, the diner door opened and a gust of wind carried in a familiar voice. "Naomi." Her little brother, Caleb, jogged inside, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He was 16, lanky, with Naomi's same sharp eyes. She rushed to him, relief flooding her expression. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at school." "Bus broke down. I walked." He grinned, dropping into the booth, Adrian's booth, without hesitation. Naomi groaned. "Not here." But Caleb had already spotted Adrian, recognition flashing in his face. "Hey, aren't you that guy? From the news? The one who?" "Caleb." Naomi cut him off, cheeks burning. "Don't be rude." Adrian's gaze softened as he looked at Caleb. "It's fine. I'm Adrian." He extended a hand. Caleb shook it eagerly, oblivious to the tension between his sister and the millionaire. "Cool watch," he said. Naomi wanted to sink into the floor. The last thing she needed was her brother tangled in this mess. But as she watched Adrian banter lightly with Caleb, something unexpected stirred in her chest. He wasn't dismissive. He wasn't arrogant. He listened, actually listened, to Caleb's chatter about basketball and broken buses. For the first time, Naomi saw a glimpse of someone different beneath Adrian's polished exterior. Still, when Caleb ran off to the counter to snag a cookie from Gracie, Naomi leaned in, her voice low and sharp. "Stay away from him." Adrian met her glare steadily. "I'm not here to hurt him. Or you." Naomi's hands tightened on the edge of the table. "You already did." A heavy silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. But Naomi couldn't walk away. Not yet. The diner was busy, her brother was watching, and Gracie's watchful eyes meant she couldn't storm off. She was trapped in his presence. And he, for reasons he couldn't yet admit, didn't want to leave. Later, as the afternoon crowd thinned, Naomi found herself wiping Adrian's table long after he'd finished his meal. He lingered, hands folded, as if waiting for permission to speak. "Naomi," he said at last, his voice low. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I do want a chance to understand." Her rags stilled against the table. "Understand what?" "You. That tattoo. What it means." Her breath hitched, anger and fear colliding in her chest. "You don't get to know that," she whispered. "You don't get to pry into my wounds just because you tore them open." Her words were a dagger, but Adrian didn't flinch. He only nodded slowly, as though he accepted the blow. For the first time, Naomi didn't see arrogance in his eyes. She saw sincerity. Maybe even regret. And that terrified her more than his cruelty ever could. The rain tapped softly against Naomi's apartment window that night, but inside her chest was a storm. She sat curled on the couch, still in her diner uniform, replaying the day over and over. Adrian's words echoed in her head. "I want to understand." Understand? No one had ever wanted to understand. People either pitied her or judged her. No one had dared to ask for the story behind the tattoo. She pressed her sleeve down over her shoulder, as though hiding it from herself. The ink had been carved into her skin when she was 21, a drunken dare that had turned into something much darker. She had been with a man back then, one who promised love but gave bruises instead. He had insisted she get it, a mark of belonging to him. She had fought to escape him. She had built walls, rebuilt her life piece by piece. But the tattoo was the one thing she couldn't erase. And now Adrian, of all people, had ripped it back into the light. The next day at the diner, Naomi moved like a shadow. She smiled for customers, poured coffee, but her mind was far away. Adrian returned, again. He slipped into the same booth, patient, waiting. Naomi wanted to ignore him. But fate, or cruelty, had other plans. "Table 6 is yours," Gracie said quietly, handing her the slip. Naomi gritted her teeth and carried the menu to him. "You don't give up, do you?" she muttered. Adrian's lips twitched. "You'll learn that about me." She set the menu down. "You shouldn't be here." "Maybe not. But I am." Her eyes flashed. "Why? To watch me squirm? To pick apart my life like one of your business deals?" "No," Adrian said simply. "To tell you something." Something in his tone, low, steady, almost raw, stopped her. Against her better judgment, she sat across from him. Adrian's gaze dropped to his hands, for once unsteady. "You're not the only one carrying scars. Mine just aren't on my skin." Naomi frowned, skeptical. "My father built an empire," Adrian continued. "Taught me that love was weakness, that money solved everything. He drank himself to death by 45. I swore I wouldn't be like him, but," his voice caught, surprising even himself. "Most days, I look in the mirror and I see him." Naomi studied him. The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded dangerous, as if speaking them cost him something. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. "Because the other night when you looked at me," he met her gaze, eyes raw. "You didn't see money. Or power. You saw me. And you hated what you saw. But maybe, just maybe, that means you saw the truth." Naomi's breath hitched. For a moment, the diner around them seemed to fade. Her walls wavered. And then, against every instinct, words slipped from her lips. "The tattoo, it isn't just ink. It's a chain. My ex, he made me get it. Said it proved I was his. Every time I look at it, I hear his voice, like I'm still trapped." Adrian's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. "He did that to you?" Naomi nodded once, sharp, as though admitting it aloud cut her open. For the first time, Adrian didn't know what to say. Anger boiled inside him, not at her, but at the faceless man who had branded her like property. He wanted to track him down, make him pay. But more than that, he wanted to ease the pain carved into Naomi's skin. Naomi looked away, shame flickering across her face. "Now you know. Happy. Happy." Adrian leaned forward, voice fierce. "Naomi, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's survival. That's strength." She blinked, startled by the intensity in his tone. No one had ever said that before. No one had dared to call her strength what she had always seen as weakness. The walls between them cracked further. But walls never fall cleanly. Later that evening, Caleb appeared at the diner again, this time with his homework spread across the counter. Adrian was still there, lingering. Naomi kept her distance, uneasy with how much she had already revealed. When Caleb glanced at Adrian's watch, curiosity lighting his eyes, Adrian slipped it off and placed it on the counter. "Want to try it on?" Caleb's eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Go ahead," Adrian said, smiling faintly. Naomi's heart lurched. She rushed over. "Caleb, no." Her brother pouted. "Why not?" "Because," Naomi shot Adrian a glare. "We don't take things from strangers." Adrian's voice was gentle. "I'm not trying to buy him. Or you. He paused. "I don't know how to be around people without giving something. It's the only language I learned." Naomi stared at him, the truth in his words knocking the air from her lungs. For once, he wasn't hiding behind arrogance. He was confessing. And though part of her still wanted to slam the walls shut, another part whispered that maybe, just maybe, he understood. The diner was quiet that evening, the kind of lull when the hum of the refrigerators filled the silence more than voices did. A thin golden light spilled through the blinds, striping the booths in soft shadows. Naomi was wiping down tables when she noticed Adrian still sitting there, hours after he'd finished his meal. She sighed. "You planning to move in or something?" Adrian's lips twitched. "Depends. Do you charge rent by the hour?" Against her will, Naomi let out the faintest laugh. It startled her. She hadn't expected him to have a sense of humor that wasn't sharp-edged. "Coffee?" she asked reluctantly. He nodded. She poured it, sliding the mug across the table. He caught it mid-slide, fingers brushing hers for a split second. Naomi snatched her hand back like she'd been burned, but not before noticing his touch wasn't cold or arrogant. It was steady. Human. They sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee. The tension that had once felt like barbed wire now hummed like a quiet current between them. Finally, Adrian spoke. "When I was 16, my father made me close my first business deal. He stood behind me the whole time, whispering what to say, correcting me when I hesitated. Afterward, he told me I'd never be loved unless I was powerful. That stuck with me." Naomi's throat tightened. She glanced at him, his gaze fixed on the dark liquid in his mug. "And now?" Adrian shrugged, a humorless smile tugging at his lips. "Now I have power. But love? That's the one thing I can't seem to buy." Naomi's chest ached at the raw honesty in his voice. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to cling to her anger, to remind herself that he had humiliated her. But for the first time, she saw not the millionaire, but the man. "You ever think," she murmured, "that love isn't about power? That it's about being seen, even when you're broken?" Adrian looked up sharply, their eyes locking. For a moment, neither moved. Naomi broke the stare, busying herself with rearranging the sugar packets on the table. "Forget it. Just a thought." Adrian's voice was low. "I don't want to forget it." Later, as Naomi closed up, Adrian lingered, offering to help stack chairs. "You? Lift a chair? In that blazer?" she teased. He grinned faintly. "I'll try not to break a nail." The image of the millionaire struggling with diner chairs made Naomi laugh, really laugh, for the first time in weeks. The sound startled them both, but it loosened something heavy between them. For a moment, it felt easy. Natural. As they worked side by side, Naomi caught herself stealing glances at him. The way his jaw softened when he wasn't putting up walls. The way his hands, though made for boardrooms, didn't hesitate to do simple work. When the last chair was stacked, Adrian leaned against the counter, watching her lock the till. "Naomi," he said softly, "do you know how strong you are?" She froze, her breath catching. No one had ever said that to her. Not Gracie, not the few friends she'd once trusted. Certainly not the man who had scarred her past. She swallowed. "Strong isn't the same as unbreakable." Adrian's eyes softened. "Maybe not. But sometimes, strength is choosing to stand anyway." Something in his tone, gentle but unyielding, sank deep into her. As Naomi walked him to the door, the night air rushed in, cool, damp, smelling of rain. They stood there for a moment, the neon sign buzzing faintly above them. "You don't have to keep coming back here," Naomi said quietly. Adrian met her gaze. "Maybe I do." Her lips parted, but no words came. "Good night, Naomi," he murmured, stepping into the night. She watched him go, her chest tight with something she refused to name. Back in her apartment later, Naomi curled on the couch, Caleb asleep in the next room. She traced the edge of her tattoo through the fabric of her shirt. For the first time, the memory of her ex didn't consume her. Instead, she heard Adrian's voice. "Do you know how strong you are?" A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from shame. Across the city, Adrian sat in his penthouse, staring at the skyline. For once, he didn't pour a drink. He let the silence surround him, Naomi's laughter still ringing in his ears. It wasn't power. It wasn't conquest. It was something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Do you believe that people who start as enemies can grow into something more, maybe even love? Or does the past always linger too heavily? Share your perspective below. The next evening, the diner buzzed louder than usual. Word had spread about Naomi's tattoo, about the millionaire who kept coming back. The booths were filled with curious faces, whispers weaving through the air like smoke. Naomi moved briskly between tables, head high, smile tight. Inside, her nerves screamed. She hated being stared at. She hated the way strangers looked at her now, not as Naomi, the hard-working waitress, but as Naomi, the girl with that tattoo. And Adrian, sitting in his usual booth, only fueled the speculation. His presence was like a spotlight, turning her life into a spectacle she hadn't asked for. She brought him his coffee, jaw clenched. "You don't belong here tonight." He studied her carefully. "Neither do half these people. But they came anyway. At least I have a reason." Naomi's eyes flashed. "You are the reason." Before he could respond, a voice rose from a nearby booth. "Hey, Naomi," a man called, his tone mocking. "That mark on your shoulder, what's it mean? You branded or something?" Laughter rippled through the diner. Naomi froze, the tray trembling in her hands. Adrian shot to his feet, rage sparking in his eyes. "Say that again," he growled. The man smirked. "Relax, rich boy. Just asking a question." Adrian's fists clenched, but Naomi snapped first. "Enough." Her voice cracked like thunder. The diner went still. She turned on Adrian, her face pale with fury. "This is exactly what I didn't want. Do you get it now? This is why I hide. This is why I cover up. Because people like you rip things open, and then the whole world feeds on it." Adrian's anger faltered, guilt cutting deep. "Naomi, I didn't mean." "You never mean it," she shouted, eyes blazing. "You live your whole life tearing through people like they're nothing. And I can't be another broken thing in your collection." Her voice wavered at the last word, and the pain behind it cut sharper than any insult. The diner stayed silent, every customer holding their breath. Adrian's chest heaved. For once, he had no defense. No clever retort. Just the hollow ache of knowing she was right. Naomi's hands trembled as she set the tray down, her throat tight with unshed tears. "You don't belong here," she whispered again, but this time her voice cracked with hurt, not anger. She spun and disappeared into the kitchen, the swinging door slamming behind her. Adrian stood frozen in the middle of the diner. For the first time in years, he felt stripped bare, not by her tattoo, but by her words. He dropped a handful of bills on the table, more than enough to cover his meal, and walked out without another word. The night air hit him like a slap. He climbed into his car, gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white. Her voice echoed in his head, over and over. "I can't be another broken thing in your collection." It was the cruelest thing she'd ever said to him. And yet, the worst part was that it felt true. Inside the kitchen, Naomi pressed her palms against the counter, her body trembling. Gracie hovered nearby, worry etched in her face. "Naomi." "Don't," Naomi choked out. "Please don't." Her throat burned, tears spilling down her cheeks despite her vow never to cry at work. She had let her guard down. She had laughed with him. She had started to believe he might see her as more than her scar. And now the whole diner saw her as nothing but that scar. She pulled her sleeve down tighter, hiding the tattoo as if it could erase the memory. Later, Naomi walked home in the rain, her hair plastered to her face. Caleb trailed beside her, confused and worried. "You okay?" he asked softly. Naomi forced a smile. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Inside, she felt shattered, like all the strength she had clung to was slipping through her fingers. Adrian, miles away, sat in his penthouse surrounded by silence. The city lights glittered, but they felt hollow. He poured a drink, then shoved it aside untouched. Naomi's face haunted him. Her pain. Her fury. Her broken trust. For once, he didn't feel like the man in control. He felt like the boy standing in his father's shadow, desperate for approval, terrified of being unworthy. And for the first time, Adrian wondered if he had ruined the only real connection he'd ever found. Have you ever let anger or pride destroy something fragile and real before it even had the chance to grow? What did you learn from it? Share your story in the comments. The diner was quieter than usual the next morning. Naomi moved through it like a ghost, her smile mechanical, her voice hollow. Even Gracie noticed. "You don't have to push yourself, honey," she said gently. "Take a day off." Naomi shook her head. "If I stop moving, I'll fall apart." She kept her sleeves tugged down tight, her tattoo hidden as if it were a curse. Her mind replayed the night over and over, the laughter, the stares, Adrian's face when she told him she wouldn't be another broken thing for him to collect. It should have been satisfying to drive him away. But instead, her chest felt hollow, aching with something worse than anger, loss. She had let him in. For the first time in years, she had trusted someone with her pain. And she hated herself for it. Across the city, Adrian sat in his office, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. Contracts and spreadsheets lay untouched on his desk. His assistant knocked, reminding him of a meeting. He waved her away. All he could think of was Naomi. Her voice cut through him. "You live your whole life tearing through people like they're nothing." And she was right. He thought of all the women he'd dated, the deals he'd crushed, the lives he'd stepped on to climb higher. He had spent his life building a fortress of wealth and arrogance. And for what? To sit in a tower alone, haunted by the look in Naomi's eyes? Adrian stood abruptly, pacing. For the first time, he wondered if his father had been wrong. Maybe love wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the only thing that could save him. But could Naomi ever believe that? After what he'd done. That night, Naomi sat on the fire escape outside her apartment, the cool air brushing against her damp cheeks. Caleb poked his head out the window. "You've been out here for hours." "I needed air," she murmured. He climbed out beside her, bumping her shoulder with his. "It's about him, isn't it?" Naomi stiffened. "Don't start." "You like him," Caleb said simply. "I saw the way you looked at him. And the way he looked at you." Naomi shook her head, blinking back tears. "It doesn't matter. He ruined everything." "Or maybe he just doesn't know how not to ruin things," Caleb said quietly. "People can change, Naomi. You changed after everything." His eyes flicked to her sleeve, to the tattoo she kept hidden. Her chest tightened. "That's different." "Is it?" Caleb asked softly. "You were trapped once. And you got out. Maybe he's trapped too. Maybe he just needs someone to believe he can." Naomi looked at her brother, his youthful face carrying wisdom far beyond his years. She hated that he was right. Because no matter how hard she tried to bury it, the truth whispered inside her, she didn't just hate Adrian. She wanted him. She wanted to believe in him. But wanting was dangerous. Meanwhile, Adrian drove aimlessly through the rain-slicked streets, his mind a war zone. He saw Naomi in every reflection, her guarded smile, her trembling hands, her furious strength. At a red light, he slammed his fist against the steering wheel. "Coward," he muttered at his own reflection. "You destroy everything and then run." He pulled into a parking lot and sat there, rain streaking down his windshield. His father's voice echoed in his head, "Love is weakness." But Naomi's voice rose louder, "Strength is choosing to stand anyway." For the first time, Adrian realized he had a choice. He could keep hiding behind money, arrogance, and empty conquests. Or he could do the hardest thing he'd ever done, risk rejection, risk humiliation, and fight for something real. Naomi lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in the diner, his face stripped bare, not smug but shattered. Her heart whispered that maybe she'd been too harsh. Maybe he hadn't meant to destroy her. Maybe, like her, he was just a person carrying scars too heavy to bear alone. But her head screamed caution. He'll break you. Don't you dare let him in. Still, when she finally drifted into restless sleep, her last thought was not of fear, but of his voice, soft and steady. Do you know how strong you are? The next morning, Adrian stood outside the diner just before opening. He stared at the familiar chipped paint, the neon sign buzzing faintly, the place where his life had unraveled. He was terrified. Terrified of her anger. Terrified she wouldn't even look at him. Terrified of proving his father right, that he wasn't worthy of love. But for once, Adrian chose fear. He chose to walk inside anyway. And Naomi, tired, wary, but stronger than she realized, looked up from behind the counter. Their eyes locked, a storm of pain and possibility hanging in the silence between them. The choice was coming. For both of them. If you were Naomi or Adrian, would you take the risk of reaching out again after so much hurt, or protect yourself and walk away forever? Share your choice in the comments. The morning light spilled across the diner in soft gold as Naomi wiped the counter, her movements slow, heavy with dread. She hadn't slept. Her mind had been a tug-of-war between anger and longing, between self-preservation and the ache of something she didn't want to admit. Then she looked up. Adrian stood just inside the door, rain still clinging to his coat. His posture was steady, but his eyes, those sharp guarded eyes, were wide open now. No walls. No smirk. Just a man stripped bare. Naomi froze, her rag clenched in her fist. The diner was nearly empty, just a couple of early risers and Gracie humming behind the kitchen window. The quiet made the air heavier. Adrian took a step forward. Then another. Finally, he stopped at the counter. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, his voice low but firm. But I need you to hear me. Naomi's throat tightened. Adrian. Please, he interrupted gently. Just this once, let me finish. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded, her heart hammering. He exhaled, as if steadying himself. I've spent my whole life believing power made me worthy. That if I had enough money, enough control, no one could hurt me. But it turns out, the only thing that's ever made me feel alive is you. And I destroyed that because I didn't know how to be gentle. Naomi blinked hard, tears burning the corners of her eyes. Adrian continued, his voice breaking. You were right. I've torn through people my whole life. But you're not another broken thing to me, Naomi. You're the only person who's ever made me want to be whole. And I won't, walk away without telling you that. Silence stretched between them. The words hung in the air like fragile glass, threatening to shatter at any second. Naomi swallowed hard, her hands trembling. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to cling to the safety of anger. But instead, what rose inside her was something far more dangerous: hope. Do you know what you did to me? She whispered, her voice trembling. You ripped me open in front of everyone. You made me feel like I was back in that nightmare again, like I was nothing but a mark on my skin. Adrian's chest ached. I know. And I hate myself for it. But I swear to you, Naomi, I see more than the mark. I see you. All of you. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you let me. Her breath caught. His words weren't slick or calculated. They were raw, desperate, and real. Naomi turned away, blinking back tears. She pressed her palm against the counter, grounding herself. For so long, she had built her life on strength, on hiding, on never letting anyone close enough to hurt her again. But Caleb's words echoed in her head. Maybe he just doesn't know how not to ruin things. Maybe he needs someone to believe he can. Slowly, she looked back at him. His eyes were wet, his jaw trembling with the effort of holding himself together. Adrian, she whispered, I don't need you to fix me. I know, he said softly. I just want to stand beside you while you fix yourself. And maybe you can help me fix me too. Naomi's heart cracked wide open. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she stepped out from behind the counter. Her feet moved slowly, cautiously, until she stood inches from him. The diner seemed to hold its breath. Naomi reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his. He didn't grab, didn't take. He simply waited, patient, trembling, until she laced her fingers with his. Her voice shook. "Don't make me regret this." Adrian's lips curved into the faintest, most broken smile she'd ever seen. "I won't." And for the first time, she believed him. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Naomi closed up the diner with Adrian at her side. They laughed softly over stacking chairs, just as they had that night when everything had felt possible. But this time, it wasn't fragile. It was chosen. Gracie peeked out from the kitchen, her eyes misty. She didn't say a word, just smiled knowingly and slipped away. Outside, the neon sign buzzed, casting a pink glow on the pavement. Naomi and Adrian stood together, the city humming around them. Naomi took a shaky breath. "You still scare me." Adrian squeezed her hand gently. "Good. You scare me too. Means we've got something worth losing." She laughed, soft but real, and leaned into him. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of her scar. She felt light, seen, loved. And Adrian felt something he never thought possible. Not power, not conquest, but peace. As they walked down the street together, Caleb watched from the window of their apartment above the diner, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, he let himself believe his sister wasn't carrying her burden alone anymore. Naomi had chosen to open her heart. Adrian had chosen to face his demons. And together, they had chosen love.
Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. I truly appreciate your love and support. If this story kept you entertained, then you're definitely going to enjoy the next one. It's even crazier, more intriguing, and packed with surprises you won't want to miss. Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of my upcoming stories. And now, don't stop here. Click on the video popping up on your screen right now and dive straight into the next story. Trust me, it's one you'll be glad you watched.